Welcome back to our home libraries. For today's spooky season episode, our next to last one, unfortunately, or fortunately, we'll decide that later, we're going to be discussing The Library of the Dead by T.L. Huchu. We are going to be spoiling the plot of this book for you, so if this is something that you're interested in reading and you don't want us to spoil it, then make sure you stop listening before we get into the questions. But do come back and give this a listen once you have read. And of course, you can always head over to our Instagram, Facebook, or YouTube channel to check out some extra content. All of those are our home libraries, plural, because we're two people.
Yeah. So for this spooky episode, as we said, it's called The Library of the Dead. So the title really caught us and we thought it was going to be spooky and
it did. It got me good at the bookstore.
Mm-hmm. So the story is set in Edinburgh and it follows our lead, Ropa. She is a young girl with this pretty unique ability, although I think it's somewhat common in this world, but not everyone can do it. But she has this ability to communicate with spirits of the dead. So people that are kind of lingering in this plane, she can help them send messages to their loved ones or any final things that they need to do. They do have to pay her for these services. And then eventually that helps them cross on to like another plane. This skill set is called a ghost walker, I think.
I think it's supposed to be a combination of ghost and talker.
Oh, but yeah, ghost stalker.
But like they combined it into one word.
Gotcha. So anyway, she tries to help these spirits find closure. However, her life takes kind of like a dark and sinister turn when she agrees to help this spirit that can't pay her. And normally this is a no-go for her. She only does it for payment because her family's not in the greatest shape financially. And she discovers that children are going missing. And she's trying to figure out what's going on and what's happening. Along the way, she kind of forms some friendships with people that she had lost touch with in the past and discovers something called the Library of the Dead, which she hopes will help her solve this mystery as she navigates this really eerie world and uses the abilities that she has and then these new abilities that she maybe starts to learn. So that's the summary.
Yeah.
Did we like it though?
Well, I rated it the lowest I have ever rated a book for this podcast. I gave it a 1.
Wow.
Yeah. I feel like
I gave it a 2 out of 5.
I think I went into this like with higher expectations because when it first came out, it did generate a bit of buzz. But I was pretty underwhelmed and frankly frustrated. I feel like the plot itself had potential, but the pacing was a really big issue for me. And the dialect that this was written in made it very difficult for me to actually get into the narrative.
I agree. I said that the dialogue, it felt like almost choppy or like not quite how people normally communicate. So like when I was reading sentences, I was just a little thrown off by them. I think that the premise is really cool. Mm-hmm. But then I was also disappointed because I thought we were going to see and experience more about the Library of the Dead itself because it's this
the title of the book.
Essentially like almost other world. Yeah, and this like other world that has all this information. And it just felt like there was too many plot points. And then some stuff felt a little too rushed to me. And then other stuff wasn't like developed enough. So I think it was a cool premise. Mm-hmm. But not exactly my cup of tea.
And maybe we are a little bit biased about the dialogue because I really do think that the author was trying to use an authentic Scottish dialect in the communication that we were reading and in our narrator, which is Ropa. But it didn't resonate with me at all. It was just so difficult to understand.
Yeah, and I had said to you, Carrie, that I think, which I'm shocked to say this, but I think I'm maybe a little bit past the YA genre. Because the past couple that we've done, I'm just like, yeah, it's okay. But it doesn't catch me like it used to, which I guess makes sense. I mean, I'm not really the target audience for that anymore. But it used to be like my go-to, like if I just wanted like something quick and light to read, a YA book would usually fill that ticket for me. And now they're not quite hitting the mark for me.
Yeah.
Which is, I guess, a good thing.
And maybe we are just in like a different age bracket now where we are not the target market for young adults. So
yeah.
Maybe that's also part of it. Who knows?
Yeah, so I do think that that's some of our own, like, I guess, bias weighing in maybe with this one. So
yeah. I will say, though, that the city itself is a really interesting backdrop for this story. It's a really cool setting. And we see this blending of the like mundane everyday life of people who are not really financially well off at all. They're basically living in slums. And it mixes with the supernatural elements. And this blending does kind of impact the atmosphere of the novel. I mean, Edinburgh is a real city, so it's grounded in a real world setting, but then we also get ghosts. And we also have this idea that the ghosts are well accepted. People accept that ghosts exist and even attempt to communicate with them. So that was one interesting part of this book.
Yeah, and I mean, I said it before, but I think the idea is neat that like that the planes can kind of intersect and certain people have this skill set to like communicate and help move people through these planes. So I found it interesting, which I think is kind of the idea that we all maybe have, that there could be ghosts like among us, but not everyone can like see or experience this paranormal activity. So to have people that are able to like communicate and facilitate that is really neat. And I like that we got to see some of Ropa like using her skill for that. So yeah, it was a cool atmosphere though, I would say. And I do kind of like, it's not always my go-to, but I do sometimes like the urban fantasies or like urban settings where it's like inside like a city. So even though it's like a, you know, big city or whatever, it does feel almost like contained, like the area where she like lived was kind of the focus. So I think it's fun. I mean, that's neat.
Yeah. I think that one thing the author did not take advantage of with this world that he was building is that at one point we get to see Ropa basically doing astral projection, and she goes into this whole other plane where ghosts exist, like that's where they live after they die. It's like the afterworld almost. And there are these,
when she does, she called it a walk around.
Yeah, she did. And there are these interesting like guards of this world that are supposed to keep out the living, and I think that we saw so little of that, but that would have been a really interesting part of this story and this world to explore more.
Well, and part of me wonders, because this is actually part of the series, so I'm wondering if really like this first book is to kind of lay this groundwork for all these things that then are going to like delve into more, like actually like, going to the library, talking about like being between the planes, like if you get stuck there, like we kind of know that it's super dangerous, but like I wonder if maybe that's what the future books in the series are. I didn't do any research into it, so I don't know. But
I'm the kind of person who buys books that come out in series before I've actually read the first one and realized I didn't really like it that much. So I do have the second one. It's called Our Lady of Mysterious Ailments, and it's supposed to tie in more with Priya, who was her friend in the library.
Her friend.
Yeah.
Well, and that's interesting because so we already have this world where there's like these supernatural ghosts, but then also like other kind of supernatural creatures, like you talked about the guards, that the collector that was the name of the big bad that was given to the person who was like taking these children. There's definitely other supernatural elements, but when Ropa gets down to the Library of the Dead, she's also introduced actually to like magic, and her friend Priya knows how to like utilize the magic. So how does, I guess, kind of the magic in this world differ from how we've like seen it in other books? Or other fantasy novels, and what aspect did you like the most of this?
I think that in a lot of other books, magic is something that is inherent to a person and then must be practiced. Whereas in this one, I mean, it is kind of still inherent to a person, like you can either do it or you can't, but it's also really connected to your ancestors, and
Yeah.
it is connected to basically like social issues as well, like inequality. If you don't have the right social status, then you can't have access to learn more about your potential abilities. And I think that inequality is something that is really evident in this story. But in order to access the Library of the Dead, right, you have to pay a fee, and it's like a lot of money.
Yeah.
And Ropa is like, I'm never going to get this money. But at the same time, the library is like a giant repository of knowledge that she could potentially learn anything.
Yeah, and as far as we've seen, this is really the only place that she can get like all that information that she would need to learn how to use her magic. When she's talking with her grandma throughout the book, you get the sense that like maybe her grandma knows she has the ability to like call upon magic. But it isn't until she gets to the Library of the Dead that she starts like realizing that and then reading the books. And I wouldn't say she's super successful with her magic yet, but that maybe that will be the progression.
Yeah. I did like how kind of like midway through the story, she has this book about fire magic, and it was really interesting that they had broken it down in a way that it was basically physics. Like there was an equation related to using fire magic, and like in order to use the magic, you have to understand all of the theory behind it, which was interesting to me.
I was gonna say it reminded me just a little bit of when we read Shadow and Bone, when they call magic small sciences or whatever, because it reminds me of that, like that there was a lot of like theory and stuff that you had to then practically do before you could even utilize the magic. So it reminded me of that a little bit. I wouldn't say that it's, when you read it, it's like jumps off the page as being the same thing. It wasn't that at all, but it was this idea that there's so much more to it instead of just like do magic.
Yeah. It's also, I think it's something that people know exists, but it's still like, other than the ghost aspect of this, magic is not really widely accepted. So in a way that makes Ropa isolated from other people her age, that combined with the ghost talking that she does, she dropped out of school. She doesn't really have any living friends, though she does seem to be like an empathic person. She is responsible for delivering messages from the dead to their living loved ones, you know? And I think,
but I also would say that oh, go ahead. Finish
you can
your
go ahead
sentence.
if you had a thought.
I would say I don't think that she's actually empathetic. That's like some growth that we see from her. She's very like all about the business initially.
Yeah, initially,
but
for sure.
Go on. Yeah.
She's very much like a loner at the beginning, and is like, oh, you can't pay me, then sorry, take your messages somewhere else. Yeah. But then, like you mentioned in the summary, she does eventually speak to a mother, and that mother's son was missing when she died. So then Ropa spends most of the story trying to figure out what happened to this child and where he is
and
whether
other
he
children.
can be saved. Yeah. That kind of like opens up this whole conspiracy where a bunch of kids have gone missing, and like if they come back, weird things have happened to them. Like one of them, what was his name, Max or Matt or something with an M, but he was a friend of this kid that she's trying to find. And she went to his house to try to like figure out how he was and ask him questions about his friend, and he was like an old man in a kid's body. He had like
the head was like an old
wrinkles
man,
and he couldn't speak.
It was weird.
It was weird.
But I think that, and then that, to touch on that, we've already mentioned there are like a lot of social issues presented in this. A lot of the kids that are going missing are kids
Yeah.
from families that aren't well off, live in the slums. So it'd be like easy. It's like a vulnerable population where if
Mm-hmm.
someone goes missing, other people in positions of power don't take it seriously.
Yeah. And the people who do
um,
take it seriously don't have the resources to figure
to
out what happened,
solve it.
to look for
Yeah.
them. Yeah.
So we do see the like Ropa change a little bit of who she is. She's now starting to formulate like some friends. She
Mm-hmm.
rekindled her friendship with Jomo. She made a new friend, Priya, and then is trying to save these kids. And I think part of it like tugged on her heartstrings a little bit because she has a younger sister, and I think that that was maybe a little bit of motivation for her,
Mm-hmm.
as well as like really seeing that these people weren't being taken care of and that maybe she could help.
Yeah, and I think her
So
grandmother also said something like, it's not always about the money.
yeah, that was
Sometimes
actually a
you
sweet
have to
moment. Her
help people
grandma,
because they really need help.
yeah, her grandma gave her like a kiss on the cheek, and she's like, "That's payment enough." I don't know why I thought it was really sweet.
So most of the characters that we meet in this book experience some kind of sacrifice, and they're also in a way struggling to survive. Ropa most of all, but I feel that, like I said, most of the characters we see this happening. Ropa kind of comes from a broken family. Her mother disappeared at one point. Who knows where her father is? I don't think we ever hear much about her father. They really struggle to make ends meet. And I think that her sister is a big motivator for her in terms of the sacrifices that she makes. And the spirits of the dead themselves are struggling in a way because they can't move into that other realm because they have some kind of unfinished business, which is why we assume that if they exist, that ghosts are here. But how do you think that themes like the social issues and the inequality and, like you mentioned, the exploitation of people who are not in positions of power, how do you see that manifesting in this book?
Well, I feel like we first kind of catch a glimpse of it when Ropa stumbles into the Library of the Dead, because there was very much this like elitist attitude when she came in, and they
Mm-hmm.
were going to like do this very severe punishment to her because they don't let
They were going
outsiders
to
in,
like
and
cut
you have
off
this
her
membership.
finger or something like that because she was in the
Yeah.
library without permission. That's crazy.
And then once they finally realized that she had like the credentials that she would need to be there, which was having like some sort of magical ability, then they were like, okay, like fine, you can be here. But then no one else was really helping her. So like even when she was in there and there's all this knowledge around, like you still, if you've never had access to stuff like that, you would still need help to learn how to use it. And no one there was like helpful. And then to see that she was getting more help from, excuse me, more help from the people that were in positions that they didn't have much to give, but they were giving as much as they could. Like, I don't remember the guy's name, but it was like a crowd she used to run with when she would like help them essentially, I think, like steal stuff. And then she got out of that business. He was helping her more than other people, like kind of this questionable character, because he knew what was morally right and what was not, even though he steals. But like, kids like should be taken care of.
Yeah.
So it was weird. It's a good read from the point of like seeing that like there are social injustices, and that hopefully people then start to change for the better, because it seemed like towards the end some of the snobs from the library like realized that she did something good, but I don't know.
Yeah. And that kind of brings us to this concept of the collector, because she does visit. I kind of think of him as like a crime boss. She visits him and he tells her that he sent a girl into a house because the house looked like it had a bunch of stuff that they could loot, and the girl never came back out. So she goes to this house, and in the window of the house she sees her mother, And like, we don't know anything about her mother. And she's like, oh my God, my mom, of course, runs up to the door as any child would when seeing their mother for the first time in years, possibly forever, you know? And when she goes into the house, she's trapped in there. Her mother is not there. It's like an illusion. Somehow the house lures children in by showing them what they really want, I guess. And the little girl that had been sent in by the crime boss had said that she saw like a teddy bear or something waving at her. Like, and that even goes back into the social inequality issues. How can a little girl not have a teddy bear?
Yeah.
Like, they're people are so poor in this world that they can't afford a teddy bear for their kid.
And I also do want to touch on, because again, it wasn't like gone into too much, but it did feel almost a little bit, not like post-apocalyptic, but definitely post something.
It was like
they
a
didn't have
dystopian situation.
Yeah. But it wasn't really like developed that much. So I don't know. There's just a lot going on in this book.
Yeah, you feel like it's kind of some kind of future where social inequality is a lot more readily evident.
Yeah.
But like it never mentioned. It was also like close enough to our time that you're not really sure where in time this book is set.
Yeah. But the collector was kind of the big bad or the antagonist.
Yeah.
In this book, or at least the one that we were referring to, until we figure out who's really like the person motivating these crimes. Did you find this to be like a believable antagonist with clear motives?
No. I mean, the motives were clear. Like, you get to the end, you find out who it is.
And that they do all this just to like keep themselves young. Yeah,
young and pretty. It really reminded me of The True Knot.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, with the steam and staying young.
It did feel like that, yeah.
But not steam. It was, I don't know what it was. What did they call it?
I don't know.
They were selling it as like a drug or something.
Yeah.
That was harvested from young kids. That's crazy.
Yeah, it was, I don't know. I felt like, again, it just wasn't that well developed. Like, I didn't.
Yeah. And even if it had been, the big bad had been so developed, I don't think that any convincing would make me empathize with someone who uses children in any way.
No,
so
definitely not. Well,
anyway,
would you read any more books in this series? Because I think I'm gonna pass.
I don't think so. I think I'm gonna say no. In fact, I'm gonna try to sell these on Pengo Books if you're interested. I'm not reading them. It's just really difficult. I tried to read it, and again, the dialogue, the dialect was hard for me. And then I was like, maybe the audio will be better, but the accent was sometimes difficult to understand. I don't know. Interesting narrative.
Yeah, it was definitely a very cool
better developed.
Premise. And again, I think though also like we're just not the target audience anymore. So
right. We ask this question about every book during spooky season, and I guess we can modify this question a little bit. Was there anything spooky to you about this book?
I actually thought when she was trapped in that house, it was this premise that she was tethered to the house and you can't step out, because if you do, it's like you're getting cut up on the inside, and there's this weird like umbilical like cord attached in her to the house. Yeah. But like almost like her intestines. And I thought that was freaky. Yeah. That did spook me a little bit.
Yeah, at one point the butler guy said you can only go as far as your intestines are long.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that freaked me out a little, I'll be honest.
Yeah. I think the way that the collector lured the children was really spooky for me.
Yeah.
I don't really
we don't like that. No,
they're like drawn inside and then they're trapped.
Yeah, I don't like that at all.
Why do that to kids? Get their hopes up like that and then be like, just kidding, you can never leave.
No, terrible. But we have
Anyway,
one
next
more
time.
book left for spooky season.
Yeah.
Yeah, one more book.
And it's going to be better. We're going to be reading from one of my favorite authors, which is Simone St. James. She published a short story at the beginning of this year, and it's called Ghost 19. Really
yeah, and I'm really glad we're going to do like a short story. I feel like this is going to be perfect for like anyone that just wants like a short spooky read for the season, because sometimes you can't commit to like a big book because Dr. Sleep was massive. So I think that this will be like a really good little spooky novella.
Yeah, especially if you're the kind of person who likes to read depending on your mood. Like, you'd let it get a little bit cooler, let it be autumn, pumpkins everywhere, and then pick up Ghost 19. And it'll only take you like a day or two to read it because it's 100 pages. So I think
it's a good one.
Good.
I think it's going to be a good one, though.
Yeah.
Well, thanks everyone. If you enjoyed the conversation today and all the rest of our So Far for Spooky Season or anything else that we put out there, please give us a little bit of love on our social media page. We'd really appreciate it. For this one, I don't know. Do we have anything special for an emoji for this one? Maybe a fox. She has a pet fox in this.
She does. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah, that is neat. So throw us up maybe a fox for this one. And just thank you guys so much for tuning in. And we'll speak with you next time.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.